find we get on really well as long as we don't talk about rugby or netball. Particularly rugby. Okay. Now, in terms of this, if you have a child with a disability, it's highly likely that you'll be told that. Maybe by the paediatrician right from the beginning of life, that basically there's not much point in, doing anything. You're given this very, quite often a catastrophic sort of expectation of what the possibilities are. If you go along to your local school, I suspect if it's anything like Australia, you'll get a story like that. You don't mean in the regular classroom, do you? The gap is going to be so big that it won't work. They couldn't possibly exactly. And you get this sort of story. It's an absolute fantasy. And to give you an idea of how old that is, that's 1879 that statement was made, but he was talking about women. Now, it's funny, but it's not. It's a very important idea to keep in mind, that what we hear now was said 150 years ago in relation to women. So it's a quite an important sort of idea to keep. When we're talking about inclusion, we need to have a pretty clear idea of what we're actually after here. And if you think of your life, the central part of your life is valued roles. If you think of the roles you've got, are huge and they're very important. And if anyone challenges those roles, we get very upset. You're a lousy parent, them's fighting words, aren't they? And if you think about losing any one of those roles that you've got, like a driver or a homeowner or any of those sort of things, these are very, very powerful. People that we're working with quite often have none, or only very limited roles in relation to their life. So basically what we're looking at is how we actually build valued roles. Obviously the person's physically got to be there to be included. They need to be socially belonging. Obviously, if you think back to school time, was the image the most important thing? Much more important than whether you could do mathematics was whether in fact you were looking good in front of your mates. So there's self-image and the image in the eyes of others is really important. But today I just want to talk about those other three, the relevance, potency of skills, what skills we want, and expectations. So let's just go through some of those relevant skills. Now, you've probably heard of those life skill things, and where do they come from? Well, actually, it was a guy called Edouard Seguin, who was actually quite positive. But he developed a curriculum for the education of idiots because they couldn't be actually educated properly in terms of academic things, but we could make them productive members of the community. And that's still, life skills are still the major curriculum today, aren't they? Now, if you think about the logic of special education, and that's my field, as I mentioned that I actually started the first school for children with multiple disabilities in WA, so I come from that particular logic. But if you think of logic, we're going to take the children with a developmental delay, put them with other children with a developmental delay, so all the models are people who are also less competent. We're going to do that for the whole of the developmental period, give them a low-powered curriculum in order to teach them how to be included. Is that going to work? And does it work? See, when we've got now 150 years of experience, what is the life outcome of that particular way of thinking? And we know what it is. It's group home, shopping workshops, etc. Let's look at girls though. When 150 years ago, they were actually denied education, weren't they? Unless they had very powerful parents. When I went to school, gives you an idea of how old I am, I went to a segregated government primary school. They had a boys' campus and a girls' campus, and I looked fenced down the middle. And it was very clear, even from that stage, of who were the important children in the school. That wasn't the girls. Then, of course, you went to high school and you learnt life skills. The boys did economics, and what did the girls do? Home economics. The boys did science, the girls did home science. Because really, what was the point in teaching girls anything when really they were just going to go and get married and look after the man? That was actually the thinking, wasn't it? Now, they didn't go to university, or if they did, they tended to go into the literary fields. And they would go into nursing, and the boys would become doctors. They were kept out of science. And I bet most of you women here believe that you're not any good at maths. Is that a very common belief? I can't do maths. You know, women aren't very good at maths. And it's only in the last 10 years that actually now girls are beating boys in maths and science at school. That took 150 years basically before we actually crossed that one. Now, I think there's a lot of similarity here that we need to keep on reflecting about, that this is a big issue. It's about a whole group of people being kept down by low expectations. Okay, so what are the relevant skills then? Well, does everyone need to have manners? I think so, don't they? You know, I think that's an important thing. So everyone need how to look after themselves, you know, walk around, etc., etc. In other words, the same skills as everyone else. I can't see any reason why a person with some developmental delay doesn't need the same skills as anyone else. At school, what's the most, what are the relevant skills? Well, I think it's the curriculum, because as societies, we decide what's in the curriculum. I don't know what it's like here, but in Australia, there's these wars on about what goes in the curriculum. You know, there's too much history, not enough history, you know, there are all these arguments about that. And as a society, we say, that's what children should learn, and it's called the curriculum. Why would that be different for a student with a disability? And in post-school, obviously, most people go to work, etc. So I'm saying the skills, the same skills are relevant for everyone. It's basically potency is the power of our teaching. Now, if we have a person with a developmental delay and we have a person without the delay, we put them in the same teaching environment, the child with a developmental delay will not learn as fast. That's what it means, isn't it? Same environment, different speed of learning. So what we've got to actually do is increase the potency or the power of our teaching if we're actually going to get over that. So let's look at some positive assumptions we might make. How about that one? They can learn faster than normal. Try that on a psychologist out there. Not a psychologist. You know, that you've got to be joking. Now, as a show, we actually do that regularly. In fact, that's my benchmark when working with children, is if I'm not teaching faster than 100%, in other words, they're not developing faster than normal, I actually need to revise what I'm doing because they're never going to catch up unless I actually get them working faster than normal. Okay, so this is an assumption that I make, is how fast a child learns depends on the quality of the teaching, the curriculum, and the motivation of the student. That's a different assumption, isn't it? It's not because he can't learn because he's got a disability, it's saying he can't learn because of me. That's my problem. And the other assumption I make, we'll come have a look at that, is the brain is quite plastic. We can actually do a heck of a lot. I don't know if you know that when the child is born, he has 3 times the neural connection of his paediatrician. It's true. And they fade away. If they're not used, then they actually drop out. Now, if we could hold a high proportion of those, can you see what I'm getting at? We're actually talking about something that's really quite interesting. Yeah, and if a child's not learning, that's my problem. We've got to stop blaming the child. You know, if the child doesn't learn well, it's because he's autistic or retarded or is a brat or whatever the particular reason is. No, if the child's not learning, that's my problem. Doesn't mean that I'll be able to teach every child everything, but I take responsibility for that. Okay, now in terms of transitions, of course, skills can be very important. The more skills you've got, the better it looks. Now, we work with children, teaching them to read from age 2. Do you think that might make a difference when they hit school? If they're reading at grade 1.5 and they hit primary school, kindergarten, do you think that might make a difference to the teachers? So just that one gee whiz skill can overcompensate for a lack of skills in other areas. And of course, the more skills you've got, the more resilience you've got more ways of actually coping with the new environment. The more skills you've got, the higher your self-esteem is, you've had success in your life, and it's just generally the opportunities you've got. So skills are very important in terms of protecting people in preparation for transitions. Okay, another really important skill, and this is something we'll talk a little bit about, is self-control. If you think about people with disability are quite often managed, aren't they? They go on behaviour management programs. It's all about management. Now, that's going to go nowhere. If we're managing a child, what's that going to look like in 10 years? Well, the child's still going to be managed. What we've actually got to build is self-control rather than us managing the child. So we need to think about that. And in particular, particularly schools are quite often using poor behaviour as a reason to throw kids out. So the more we can actually build that self-control in, it's actually going to be, again, a protection against rejection. And it's highly related to successful transitions. Okay, so let's look at this brain thing. It's got billions of neurons. And each of these, any time you do something, as I catch a ball, my arm goes out, I watch it coming and I can do that. Now when that happens, there's millions of neurons are firing, and when they fire together, they wire together. Actual connections start to grow between the thing. So the next time I do it, those connections grow stronger, and there's a thing called a myelin sheath that actually grows around that to actually mean the transmission of the electricity is faster and more efficient. Now, what this means is if we repeat actions, it actually is building it into the brain in terms of this actually occurring. So if we teach something and we teach in a regular and structured way, is that going to be more efficient than teaching in different ways where there's different connections going every time? So, now this is not about disability. This is about all kids. That this is the most effective way that we've now got, 50 years research of saying that this is the most effective way of actually teaching is to actually directly teach information rather than the unstructured. I mean, quite often as teachers, we're told, the best way is to have discovery learning, facilitated education. The data is disastrous. Structured learning, you teach it. If you need something to teach, you teach it. The bad news, of course, is maladaptive behaviours or bad behaviours also get fixed in the brain. It's not just good behaviours. If the child's worked out, this sequence of things leads to me getting attention, that'll get repeated and repeated. And the more times it gets repeated, the more firmly it's fixed in. So we've got to be pretty aware of those sorts of things. Okay, now the brain, actually the majority of the brain is for maintaining life, which is probably a good idea. It's got to maintain all the systems going and making sure we're protected, watching out for dangers and reacting accordingly and so forth. So there's a huge amount of our brain is related to that. Now, when we're first born, that's totally our behaviour, isn't it? It's totally on the basis of instinctive reactions and so forth. Now, as we develop and grow older, more and more we're getting the frontal lobes of the brain, the thinking areas of the brain starting to control more and more of our actual behaviour. Now, this doesn't finish being developed until age 25. If you've got teenagers, you know about that. And, who does the most stupid things? Quite often up to 25, isn't it? About 25, they start to get it together. So, yeah, this is a long-term thing. This isn't something that happens immediately with every child. This is a gradual process from birth through to 25. There's this whole process of actually developing the frontal lobes. But we can influence that by how we teach the child. Now, in terms of kids with a developmental delay, quite often this is underdeveloped. And the reason is that they're surrounded by low expectations. So the expectation is they're never going to go anywhere, they're not going to learn anything, and we start to help them too much. So we just, you know, would everyone here like to have a personal assistant? Some woman very unkindly said to me, yeah, but most men just get married. Very unkind. The other thing is that they're continually managed by others. If you think of the amount of control that's in their life is very, very high. Other people are making decisions for them constantly. And they have reduced opportunities for independent action. That's just part of the built-in. And a lot of choices are made for them. Even the most basic choices quite often tend to be made. There is also an issue in terms of the actual impairment, like an intellectual impairment. It's really interesting. You ask professionals, what is the actual impairment? Quite often they don't know. It's the difficulty in handling abstract concepts, which is the frontal lobes. So this is actually an issue that they will likely make poor judgments because of the underdevelopment of the frontal lobes. That's an issue of the impairment, which we can't deny. It's the same as if you've got cerebral palsy, that will affect certain aspects of your physical body. In terms of intellectual impairment, there is actually impairment there. There's a couple of other things. I hope this is not getting too technical. There's this, you've probably heard of dopamine, have you? It's called the happiness chemical. When you get rewarded, there's actually your brain gives you a dose of dopamine. And if it's successful, it gives you a dose of dopamine. The effect of it is it actually helps to build the myelin sheath. So it actually has a physical effect as well as just a nice feeling effect. How's it affected? Well, it's rewarding, as I said. If you solve problems, you tend to get a bit of a buzz. You know, when you do your crossword, you get it out. That's dopamine. Repetitive activity and social interaction, all of those tend to... Now, if you look at a lack of it's associated with, do they ring bells? Low motivation? I don't want to try that new. That sort of stuff. Heavily focusing. In other words, what we're saying here, that maybe a lot of the issue is low rate of success, low rate of positive input, is the reason for a low rate of this chemical actually being produced, which is obviously the message. The second one is serotonin, which is called the thoughtful chemical. It's, again, assisted with problem solving, etc. Basically, it has a big effect in terms of building the effectiveness of the frontal lobes. It's very much built by repetitive action. So again, this issue of repeated action tends to build this thing which tends to build the structure of the frontal lobes. Now again, lack of serotonin, they look familiar. You know, these are things, again, we're sort of looking at situations which are very common. So, basically, so what does all this tell us? We need to get a lot more positive. We need to have a much higher rate of positive going to the individual to actually try and build that, to counteract a lot of the negative that's automatically built into their life. Now, if we don't do that, there's also the thing that you tend to get these other nasty chemicals. You've probably heard of cortisol. This is highly related to stress, depression, etc. And if we have people continually failing, then we tend to get those chemicals produced which are antagonistic to learning. So if we fail, and it's logical, isn't it? We fail and we avoid learning. That's just a natural reaction. So the basic message is we've got to have structured teaching, and we need to start to engage these frontal lobes. But let's look at some expectations here. What about the first one? Nothing exceptional is achieved without high expectations. I think that's true, isn't it? That's where you get the big things happening, is when you've got high expectation. And it's better to set a high one and fail than to set a low one and meet it. So Better aim high. At least you're going to get part of the way. We're going to actually make I learned this off a parent, to make the least dangerous assumption. If you've got a son or daughter that you don't know if they understand anything, and they just got no indication of communication, what's the least dangerous assumption? They understand everything, but they can't express it. Now, if I make that assumption, will I treat that person differently? I will talk to them differently. I'll model how to interact with that person differently. A whole range of things start to happen. I don't know if it will make a difference, but I do know that I won't be doing harm, or much less likely to be doing harm, just by that one expectation. All children can learn, I hope you all agree with that. If I walk in a place with high expectations, it's almost always positive, because people really got a real push. Yeah, but the thing is, we don't want to set expectations so high then fail. I mean, that would be breaking things. So we're actually trying to get these expectations at a point where they're achievable, which means we've got to actually teach well. And the problem about it is it's so hard if a parent sort of has swallowed the idea that there's no hope, versus the parent and a similar child who said, no, I disagree with that, let's go for it. There's a lot of regret when you actually look at the difference of those two. I was talking to a parent the other day, and there was twins, and one had actually gone to a special school because they fitted under a line. The other twin couldn't make the criteria, and after 1 year the difference was massive, just in terms of the different environments. The kids obviously in the inclusion did a lot better. Okay, so let me give you something. Are all the women freaking out at this point? Okay, some of you might know this, so shut up. All right, so if I show you that, let's just say I'm going to teach you how to do that, your probably eyes are glazing over. All right, so let's have a go. That funny thing there is called sigma. It's a Greek letter, sigma, and it means add up. So everyone, sigma means add up. Sigma means add up. Sigma means add up. And I would do that 4 times normally. 4 is an important number in terms of building the brain connection. But, okay, let's go there. So each number is an x. So, sigma x means add up the numbers. Sigma x means the numbers. Sigma x means the numbers. All right. So add up the numbers. You see that? 20? You all agree with that? Is everyone with me so far? Yeah. All right. N means the number of numbers. N means the number of numbers. N means the number of numbers. How many numbers? 4. Okay? Add the numbers, divide by the number of numbers, 5. Now, if I gave you another example of 4 numbers, do you reckon you could do it? Yeah. Okay? Yep. Could I teach that to a child with disability? Yeah. Okay. So we're not talking about crazy stuff. Now for the next one. Only joking, but I teach this to teacher students quite purposefully. I'll do it in 20 minutes. For the reason I want them to get it as well, about what you can actually achieve. Well, you probably know that, I don't know it anyway. But it's just an example of what you can actually do. So let's look at what we actually did there. I believed I could do that. I believed I could take 100, 200 people in a room and actually teach you how to do something crazy like that. I worked out how to teach it. Okay, well the steps here, and I taught them like that. I taught them in a sequence. So you got one, and I worked with mastery. So you master a step, then I taught you the next step. And so on we go down. And then I joined the steps together as we went down. Now, hopefully I got the right pace there. No one was getting too bored unless you knew what it was. And it's not too hard. Okay, so we've got to get it in what we call the Goldilocks zone. Not too hard, not too easy, just right. So we've got to get it in there. And we've got to use lots of reward and encouragement in relation to doing that. Now, I suspect some of you feel a bit smug about that. You probably go and show at home, what you can actually do. Now, can you imagine what the particularly the female teacher students, when I teach them that amazing thing in 20 minutes, their self-esteem, I get lots of students say, I never believed I could do that. And this is what we're after. We're after that boost in self-esteem that people get from succeeding at something quite complex. Okay. When you first saw it, did you reckon you were going to do that in a couple of seconds? Yes, that's good idea. That's a man. Yeah. But, you know, this is... Now, do you think we could teach it that quickly? So it doesn't have to be slow, does it? So we taught something quite complex in, what, 2 minutes? We don't have to spend a lot of time on this stuff. So let's look at some impossible things. How about that? Teaching children Down syndrome, autism, etc. to read from age 2. You know about that? Okay. Students with Down syndrome, I suspect there's maybe even some in the room here who've passed year 12. So that's certainly, yeah, good idea. Okay. Students with significant disabilities learning much faster than non-disabled students. So that's some examples now. And before you all freak out about this one, this is some research we were doing, working with kids with autism. The actual black solid line there is the actual child's age. So you can see that when we first worked with him, he was 2 years, 4 months old. And I was working with his brother at that stage, and I sort of said, look, I think we need to look at Doug. And so we did a baseline on him. And this is developmental rates. So it looks at physical development, self-help skills, all of the skills at that stage. And you can see he's developmentally he was about 1 year, 6 months. So that meant that he was developing at 64% of normal, which means puts him very, very clearly into the developmentally disabled range. Now, I was working with his brother, so Mum had picked up quite a few ideas. When I said go and get him assessed, and of course to get the money, and look at how long it took to get the money. 2 years, 4 months, 3 years, 1 month, 9 months to get the money. How common is that sort of story? But you can actually see there that the two lines are nearly parallel. In other words, Mum had increased the learning rate from 64% to about 90% just in terms of just what she'd learned from working with his brother. Once we started teaching him to read, now if the dotted line is going up faster than the solid line, he's learning faster than the line. And look what happened. He's actually, we moved him out of the autism spectrum. Now, when someone sort of said about autism, I don't know what autism is, to be honest. I'm supposed to be an expert in autism. I haven't got a clue. Because I can meet a child with any characteristic of autism, and I'll find a child without autism who's got that characteristic, and vice versa. So I know kids who can't stand to be touched, I know other kids with autism who come up and give me a hug, you know, etc. So that's why I really say we need to look at the child and then look at that. But there, that's the learning rate. Since this is Mum, this isn't me, this is Mum teaching the child, 158% learning rate there since that intervention. So that's from it's 3.1, 3 years, 1 month to 5 years, 6 months. He's actually moved into the normal range. That's sort of what I'm talking about. And we've got quite a bit of other data. On my website, there's quite a bit of stuff you can download there, like reviews on inclusion, but there's also one of my students did a study around this, and there's some similar data to that on there you can actually look at. Okay, there's a child with a student with Down syndrome passing university. Well, actually, we've got several at university now, but this is passing year 12. Now, this might be a bit confronting. What age do you reckon that is? Those skills. When do kids learn those skills? 3. Somewhere between 3 and 4 they pick up those skills. Now if you have a child with developmental delay, you sort of say, of course that's what developmental delay means. At age 3 they won't be anywhere near that. That's just the reality of life. My question is, if this child at age 6 haven't got those skills, we're probably not putting enough heat on them. If they haven't got them by age 12, we're almost certainly not putting enough heat on them. Can you see what I'm getting at? This is something that we tend to let this stuff slip, and we get built into this notion of forever being the handmaiden of the child who basically could be doing that stuff. So that's a bit of a challenge, I suppose, to all families, is you need to actually start taking this stuff a bit more seriously. Because they're developmentally delayed doesn't mean that we don't have to teach them. You know, we actually have to pick that up. Okay, so how do we do it? It's all very well to say that, how do you do it? There's some research done in the 60s, in particular right to America, about what actually happens, what seems to be the main elements in teaching. And this is pretty self-evident. First of all, the child's got to be engaged. You know those times at school you're staring out the window, nothing much was going on? Okay, so you've got to be engaged. It's got to be in that Goldilocks zone. The material's got to be at the child's level, or the person's level. We've got to spend enough time on this. We shouldn't do a little minute here and a minute there. We've got to be highly rewarding. That can be either self-rewarding, or we actually build an external rewards, and it's relevant to their world. That makes sense, doesn't it? It's all pretty intuitive. But we've got to have those elements in it if we're going to actually do that. The actual way that we do it, and this is sort of something, if any of you are teachers, you'll know about this. This is probably your catechism. There's 4 stages in it. 1, I do it. I show you how to do it. 2nd, we do it together. Alright? Then, once you can, well, I reckon you can do it, I let you do it, and that's sort of like a test, and then I come back and I test later to make sure you haven't forgotten. Because that's very common. Now, where we need to work here is really on step 2. We do it together. What I see is that in classrooms quite often is the teacher will say, okay, here's how you do it. Demonstrates, step 1. Okay, let's do it together. And they give an example. Okay, now go and do the 20 on your sheets. And then the teacher walks around the room and gets this kid and says, oh, no, that's not what I mean. No, he's made 15 errors. Which do you reckon is going to be more important, the correction or the 15 errors? Wouldn't it be better to do 10 times we do it together and 1 check rather than the other way around? Now, similarly, when you're working with your son or daughter or anyone with a disability, this is all ages, this is only about children, why can't we actually start at number 2? I don't know anyone who can't do something when I do the whole lot for them. Okay, now this might be eating with a spoon. Let's take something really basic. Well, I can pick it up, bring up their mouth, you know, take back the plate. I can take them through the whole thing. They're not doing anything, they're just actually working through it. Okay, that's possible? Now, if I can do that, can I actually do it that I get to there, and then I let go at the last minute, when there's a high reward for getting at that last bit? You see? So that they're doing just that last tiny little step. Now, it may be that I can't even do that. I just need to do maybe less of a grip, even lighten the grip. See what I mean? And so on, we can work that. Are we talking about something that's feasible here? Yeah. Let's take a really, we want to get a person, what do you want to do, John? I want to manage my own business. It's a bit tough, isn't it? Because we know if we've got a person in a business and we've got them a job, what's the likelihood of them being a managing director in, let's say, 10 years? Pretty low, you reckon? I mean, for us, it would be pretty good if we were in a little business and for us to get 10 years. Now, but let's look at it another way. We put him in the role of managing director, where someone else is doing the job totally, and then what might that look like in 10 years if we gradually decrease the amount of help? Wouldn't that look very different in 10 years? In terms of the amount that person was doing. You see what I'm getting at? The idea of starting to swap these things around. that we may be able to get someone into a really powerful position by putting them there with maximum support and then gradually reducing the support. So you're spending a lot of time on this we do it, that, and then gradually reducing the amount of support as we go through. Okay, now I don't mind giving kids the answer and getting it back. If I ask you what's the capital of Bolivia, there'll probably be some smart people in the room who know that. And I'll say, yeah, well, you reckon you know that. Okay, Bogota, right, you know that. Now, if I then say, go to the kid who's looking out the window and say, so what's the capital of Bolivia? And he goes, Bogota. I think you heard that. And then I go to the student who needs some time to process it. What's the capital of Bolivia? Bogota. I go to the student with a disability and I say, what's the capital of Bolivia? High probability of getting it. Has everyone in the class learned something? See, we're talking about things. There's nothing wrong with giving the answer and getting it back. That's learning is occurring. Much better than fighting there and saying, you did it yesterday, so you've got to sit here until you do it. No. Give it, get it back. Give it, get it back. You're always trying to reduce your amount of help, but there's nothing wrong with going and doing it and then getting it back. Okay. Self-control. A lot of the behaviour you see doesn't hit the frontal lobes. This is teenagers as well, that just goes in this cycle of they erupt totally emotionally, they're out of control, no reasoning is actually operating. What we're trying to do is build this frontal lobing. Okay, so we need to build this into routines just basically all the time, anyway, why not every day, every time you have a situation, just give a choice? Would you like to have the blue jumper or the green jumper? That's pretty easy, isn't it? You're building in a choice. It's all the time, building in choices. Now, not multiple choices like you hit an American if you've been to America and they say, what would you like for a sandwich? And you get 14 types of bread and, 15 fillings and just give me a sandwich. We can work with 2 or 3 choices. But we can start building that process in of learning how to make choices. What about behaviour thinking? Now, this is an example from the school, which we're using all the time. John, 2 choices here. You can finish your work, and then you'll get points going on an excursion. Your other choice is that you can not do your work and you'll do it at lunchtime. What would be a good choice, John? You're getting him to think about it. Then, what happens? Okay, great choice, John, you did your work, that's fantastic. Off you go, here's points for excursion. But then if it's a bad choice, oh well, John, that was a bad choice. Oh well, you're just going to go and do it at lunchtime. But we'll make a better choice next time. Non-emotional, you're not losing it with a person. You're just giving this, well, it's your choice. Now, isn't that life? You make choices and you cop the consequences. So this is all we're talking about. But if you start building that in all the time of choices, then you're starting to build some self-control. Now, this is not instant. If it takes 25 years with a normal teenager, this isn't going to be overnight stuff. But this is the process of actually teaching that. The other thing, the other thing about that is you can cut him off at the pass. You can actually see something building. Now, what would be a good choice here, John? That was a great idea. Good choice you made. So you actually cut him off at the pass before it actually starts going. He's controlling his world. He chose to do it. So you're putting responsibility on him. He's got to take personal responsibility for this. So we can cut him, that's what I was talking about, the cutting off the past. And you can, if he does cut off, I'm so proud of you, building in lots of positives in that. Everyone get that? So the idea is just a general strategy. But the follow-through is critical. When I'm working with teachers, students, I sort of say, if you say you're going to do something, you do it, If you say, if you do that again, I'm going to kill you, well, you've got a real problem, Don't say it. Okay, expectations are fundamental. So these are the big ideas that I'm trying to get to you. Expectations are everything. I just work on the expectation that I'm going to be able to do it, and they say crazy things to parents like, yeah, we're going to get you over 100% learning rate, and you know, I can't obviously guarantee it, but that's where I stick my neck out. Do you think I might be highly motivated to get something to happen? So these are basic things. Just a little thing about reading though. I don't know if you know how many students hit high school unable to read to grade 5. Probably not in New Zealand, but in the rest of the world. 30%. Now, to read the textbooks in high school, you've got to read in grade 6. Now, if you're working with your son or daughter on reading, pulling something off the internet or whatever, or going and buying the local shop or some reading program, are you likely to do better than a fully trained teacher? See, we've got to think about that, what actually works. Now, we're working with, we can do it, clearly, in terms of that, but you can't waste time on these sorts of things. You've got to be working the most powerful methodologies that you can actually do. I've got some stuff here you can actually show you. I don't know if you know that there's, I've got all the skills a child normally learns between 0 and 6 is actually been documented, and every one of them has got a little teaching program on it. That's available. Wow. So, you know, it's just, these are things that are out there, but you need to be just grabbing something off the internet. It may not do it, but it may not be so effective. Okay, basically the relevant skills are the same as everyone else. We need to be working on all of these same skills as everyone else. Sometimes you have to make some choices. Sometimes you say, well, okay, that's not so important. Is it really important that they know that, you know, this? And sometimes you can say, no, just let it go. Other things you may want to actually go for. Normal school curriculum. How do we actually do that? Well, let me give a couple of examples. How many of you know what an electron shell is? Oh, terrific. I don't know. This is year 9 chemistry. This whole room, there's only 1 or 2 people knows year 9 chemistry. Do you really need to know what an electron shell is? But do you need to know what an atom is? I think you do. Isn't it? Normal conversation, you'd be expected to know that. Electron, most of you know that. Protons, neutrons, now we're getting a bit diggy. Can I teach those 4 things to a student with disability? What's fun? Patrick has got this wonderful book where he actually puts this really beautifully. He says, when a teacher walks in the classroom, there's 3 things. 1, I want every student in the class to know this at the end of the lesson. And then normally 2 or 3 things. I would hope that most students get this amount of information, which is obviously a lot more. And I'm hoping that there's a few students who will get these bits, smart kids. Now, if a teacher walks into a room saying, I want everyone to get these key points, I'll bet you it's 2 or 3 things. If it's 2 or 3 things, I can teach that to a child with a disability. Even a child who I points. Hold on, I can set up the 2 alternatives I'm teaching, then you can look for the correct answer. Even people with multiple disabilities. Even if I've got to actually take his hand and put him, I don't know if he's learning, but I can actually engage him in that same curriculum. Are we talking reality of a student in high school being in the same class, doing the same material? See what I'm getting at? This isn't impossible. So yeah, clearly, post-school, what's some of the interesting stuff that's coming out of there is apprenticeships are a really, really good way of actually going. If you think about that, it's really mentoring, isn't it? It's a great idea. The other thing is lots of kids on apprenticeships can't read because they're part of that 30% who didn't make it in high school. The people in these courses know about that I've got to actually provide a lot of support to these kids in the academic bits. Is this a perfect opportunity? Now the outcome is these kids actually are better as a full, when they finish their apprenticeship, than the mainstream kids. So, you know, it's just some of those sort of things. But again, you know, we're talking about university, etc. But basically, yeah, we need to teach well, we need to teach fast, and we need to have high expectations. Thank you.